I'm Fred Deering. I'm a retired pastor from Holston Conference and presently under appointment as the district superintendent of the South Sudan district of the East Africa Annual Conference. Currently in exile here in the U.S. Due to the war and COVID. So that's who I am.
Hi, I'm Libby Deering, and I am a retired nurse. Went from nursing, went from a career in nursing straight to the mission field. So I mostly work with the vulnerable orphan children.
Okay, so kind of to expound a little bit on what you've just introduced on your introduction, could you kind of let us know your story of how you got involved in this mission and in this ministry?
Well, that's a very long and detailed, so I'll give you the thumbnail sketch. In 2006, the conference staff had been reading a book. What is it? They poured fire.
Yeah, they poured fire on us from the sky.
And it was written from a children's perspective, about their experience of the war between North and South Sudan. They were referring to gunships and bombs being rained on them. And they read that, and as a conference staff, they wanted to select a project working with South Sudan for the conference staff. One day, an African pastor walked into the conference office and requested an audience with Bishop Swanson. By a miracle, God's providence, Bishop Swanson was in the office and free and not in a meeting. And so the pastor met with Bishop Swanson. He was originally there to talk to him about Uganda. And Bishop Swanson informed him that the staff focus was on South Sudan and whatever they could do there. And the pastor grinned and he said, "My dear Bishop, I am the district superintendent of South Sudan." That pastor was Daniel Wandabula, who is now the bishop of East Africa Annual Conference. It was at that point that Bishop Swanson appointed 3 people to go on a fact-finding exploration mission trip in South Sudan. He selected Anita Henderlight, Reverend Tom C., and myself. We went over and spent a few days in Uganda meeting with church leaders, projects, and went to South Sudan and spent 4 to 5 days meeting with government officials, church leaders, UMCOR, and other folks. And I did what I was told not to do. In the midst of the meeting, I just got so overwhelmed hearing these folks. They were very confused because they had heard absolutely nothing from the church. We were completely silent. But what they didn't understand, we didn't even know they existed. We didn't know there was a United Methodist Church in South Sudan. And so they talked about countless people coming over and taking pictures and making promises and leaving. And I heard so much of that, and my heart just hurt. And finally I stood up, and I can remember saying, "I don't know about anyone else, but I will be back, and others may come with me." And I said, Holston Conference does not lie. And I sat down, and Anita looked at me and kind of grinned and said, "Well, so much for not making commitments." And so we came back, and after that, there were numerous short-term mission teams going over to South Sudan and coming back. But also remember, this was the time when the South Sudan was a major missional emphasis of the general church. So there was a lot of exposure to South Sudan United Methodist Women. That was part of their mission study. If you remember, the children's choir came over from South Sudan and toured Holston Conference and toured many other places in the nation. And so the teams went over and came back. And that was the start. I'll let Libby share with you. She was part of those mission teams that came and went.
When Fred came back and he told all of the stories of the people, and I saw the pictures, I fell in love. I just simply fell in love, and my heart broke, and for the orphans. And I prayed at that point, God, I don't know if there's anything at all I can do. Just, send me. Well, I retired, and within a few months, I went to a short-term mission team, and subsequently went 7 times before we moved there in 2011. And like I said, the children just captured my heart, and that's where my focus was.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad the detail that you went in and the back history that you gave on that, Fred. And Libby, children have my heart too, so I get that. But also, I think it's really amazing how, God, through his Holy Spirit, really placed upon both of your hearts, not just one or the other, but both of you really felt that call in your hearts. So you were together on that to go. So can you talk to me a little bit about now that you're there full time? So since 2011, right? Is that what you said? You've been there full time? So now that you're there, can you tell us kind of a little bit about what your mission in South Sudan involves? And then also, can you talk briefly on how the status of the civil war and moving to Uganda has impacted your mission and your work there?
Well, we actually followed 2 missionaries that we initially sent over in 2009. That was the Reverends Boo and Phyllis Hankins. And they had experience in Liberia. And our conference, our bishop had been requested to send some missionaries, to send a clergy person, to do leadership training and church development. And so none of us had experience in Africa. I'd had a lot of experience on short-term missions, but not living there, staying there. And we knew the Hankins and they had been there. So we consulted with them. They graciously agreed to serve 2 years. And so it was on their shoulders when we went in 2011 that we began our service. We were volunteer missionaries. We serve without salary. We're appointed under GBGM and Holston Conference. We're called Individual Volunteers in Mission. They may have a different title for us now, but that's what it was. So we went into South Sudan. Steve and Diantha Hodges were there, then we had another missionary couple, Doctors Lynn and Sharon Fogelman, and also another lady who came later, Carolyn Goodwin. When we went over, we looked at a holistic mission to, and I think this is probably the YMCA's logo or slogan. It's spirit, body, and mind. And it was targeting the whole person. And so when we went and met with them, they were their number one priority. I'd asked them to prioritize their needs. Their number one priority was leadership development. Second was microfinance. Third was education. And we began to apply for advanced specials through GBGM to to allow us to raise funds for those specific areas. And we began to work in those areas. Diantha worked with the medical. The Fogelmans worked with the Imagine No Malaria that would later follow. They did leadership or medical training for the healthcare providers. And we worked with the government through Holston Conference. Over 30 boreholes, wells were drilled for clean water. Some churches were built by districts and churches. Some schools were built, and also some teachers were beginning to be trained. And so you all, you look at us, but we weren't the ones really doing it. It was you. And all we were doing is taking the resources you provided and applied them as God led you, as we brought the needs to you. And this is what we were doing then. And until now, the war broke out in 2013, and we happened to be home. And so the bishop had us stay here until that subsided. We went back and began working again and helping the folks. And then in July 2016, all that changed. I'll let Libby, she was actually there when that happened, and I'll let her share what happened then and what happened to us.
Fred I had already returned to South Sudan. Fred stayed behind in the US because he had undergone some medical procedures and had not been released by the doctor. And I wanted to go on and start working. So I had not been there very long, maybe a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. And Fred was getting ready to come back. And we suddenly heard that war was breaking out and that we needed to leave. Well, we made a plan and we were going to leave. But then the next morning, we heard from the UN to get out now. And so we literally had to pack a bag and leave right then. So it was me and the Fogelmans and Carol and Goodwin and our very brave staff. The driver and one of the guards took us across the border to Uganda. We found out 2 hours after we left, after we got across the border, they closed it. So, we saw a few things along the way that of militia or some of the military. We weren't sure what was going on, but God saw us through. And about that time, Fred was getting ready to come back in. And I fortunately was able to reach him by email and say, stay in Entebbe because I'm coming out. So we met up in Entebbe and we stayed there in a motel for a while because we thought this was just going to be very short term and we were going to be going back to South Sudan, but it proved not to be so. So we came back here before we went back into Uganda.
So then your did your mission then become a refugee mission? I mean, did you set up like a refugee village then in Uganda, or how did that work, since this was an ongoing war?
Once we determined we were not going to be able to go back in, and quite a few of our pastors came out. A lot of the folks we worked with in South Sudan came out. They were coming out at the rate at our particular checkpoint and border crossing in Kiboko. They were coming out at the rate of 3,000 to 4,000 per day. And a lot of our church folks, pastors, came out, and they were being put in refugee camps. And a lot of our folks at that time were being placed in what is called Rhino Camp, and then that has different zones and sections in it. And so as they were coming out, we stayed at the border, worked with them, located them as they set up in the refugee camps. Libby also worked very hard to make sure that the children that we were responsible for at Grace Home, we got the administrator or the manager, the director, got half of them out. He got them out before the war became bad. The other half of the children got trapped. And so once again, Libby, working with our staff in South Sudan, our pastors, just, I mean, brave. And they kept trying to go in and get to them. The army kept turning them back. It was just too violent. Well, the children got trapped between the opposing forces, and they had to run and hide in the bush for 4 days. And then once that battle subsided, they were able to come back to the home, and our pastors just said, enough's enough, and they went in and got them and brought them out. And they stayed at Grace Home for a few days, and then arrangements were made to take the children out. And that in and of itself was an extremely risky, dangerous journey, but they got them out. And the day that Libby saw them at the border when they brought them out was a day of great rejoicing. And they were reunited with the other children at Grace Home there in the camp. That changed our ministry. We work with the churches and pastors in the refugee camp, but I also have some pastors who remained in South Sudan. So they have chosen to remain. They still serve there. They're serving the church, the compound where we live, Captain's House. We had to renovate it. The roof fell in. And then because of security, they had to build a brick security wall inside the fence and put up reinforced gates. We still have the guards, the dogs, and some of the staff that are staying there are living in that house. And if there is great danger in the bush where the pastors are, they can come, bring their families, and live there in that compound. So the church is being managed by a young man by the name of Robert Mawa. He's not a pastor. And he's managing the affairs of the church. And a young lady, Charity Latiwa, who was trained, who was one of our scholarship students trained in finance, is there. And she manages the money there under the supervision of Joyce Jaka, who is in Uganda, who is our overall financial manager. So we actually have a two-pronged ministry now, South Sudan and Uganda, and are working, doing mainly now our focus is education, educating children, women, our pastors. The blessing of this disaster is that we're able to get the pastors in a Methodist Bible college in Kampala. And just a year or so ago, we ordained 3 of them. And when we are able to have annual conference once again, we'll ordain 6 more. That wouldn't have been possible while we're in South Sudan, just the expense of back and forth. Joyce Jaka has finished her education, or her undergraduate in finance. Robert Ruba, who coordinates education and is doing intensive English training in the camps, he completed his master's. And then the former director of Grace Home, he is working on his bachelor's in business management. And we have others. There's some youth. Now, what they call youth is not what we call youth. These are young adults. And there's many of them who want to be trained, educated. So our main focus right now is education. We have our leadership team here in the conference, the foundation, Holston Foundation, under Paul Bowman is looking over and looking out for the finances. When the war broke out, that presented a unique challenge. Because of corruption there, the officials emptied out the central bank. So the foreign reserves were gone. We couldn't get money out of the bank. And over the last year, we were able to recover a few dollars. But like all your Imagine No Malaria funds are still trapped there. We've tried to transfer them to UMCOR, but we haven't been successful. We're still working on that. So, but because I was not physically in South Sudan, because Libby was not there, the National Advance Funds, the Advance Mission Offerings, I'm sure you're familiar with those, they could not wire those to us in Uganda because we were not physically in South Sudan. So those were frozen. Just very recently, because of your unique relationship with GBGM, no other conference has the relationship you have with GBGM. They froze those advanced specials, and just 2-3 months ago, they sent Holston Conference the balance of those funds. And it was mainly agriculture, animal husbandry, and also microfinance. And so we were able to put money in the pastors' hands and their family for agriculture. The pastors took the animal husbandry funds and rather than take those for their families, elected to have those be church projects. So what's happening now is churches are raising goats, they're raising chickens, some have raised turkeys. So this will also help in income development. Their gardens hopefully will help them produce seed and food and alleviate some of the food insecurity because the UN cut their food rations in half. They were already small. And so, I mean, they have just undergone untold suffering. And so that's how this has impacted us. But it's been a blessing too.
So just to clarify for my own benefit, the agriculture and the GBGM relationship helped to get the funds to the people that are still in South Sudan, or is this part of the refugee camp in Uganda?
Both.
Both. Okay.
Yeah, we were able to. Those projects are implemented by Holston Conference, and the money that is sent here, we're able to wire to the bank account in Uganda. From there, Joyce Jaka, in consultation with the pastors, determined how to divide those funds up, and then they were distributed. So that's the mechanism there.
Okay, that's a good clarification. Now, I wanted to expound a little bit on the move to Uganda. So you talked about how your captain's home, is that correct? Captain's
Yes.
house is available for a safe haven for those that are still left behind in South Sudan by choice or by circumstance. But then moving to Uganda, so did Grace Home move with you to Uganda, Libby, or did it kind of dissolve? And where are you right now with Grace Home? What's the status of Grace Home?
As Fred said earlier, this is a long story, and I will try to just give a thumbnail sketch, and I will try to be very fair about this. So if I say anything that needs to be edited out, feel free to do so, okay? When the kids, we have had in South Sudan, we had 2 Grace homes. One was in Lanya County and one was in Ye. The children from Ye were the ones that came out first, and the ones in Lanya were the ones that got trapped. So UN, when they finally came over to Uganda, the UN UNHCR, which is the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, they allowed all of them to stay together. Okay. The mamas came with them. The guards came. We had full staff and everything. We lived like that until just recently when the Ugandan office of the Prime Minister saved the children, and UNHCR decided that it would be better to disperse those children among their guardians. We begged and we pleaded, and we presented every situation we could to try to get them to work with us. They refused, and they said, no, it is against our law. Orphanages are against the law in Uganda. They need to be with family. Well, this is the family that couldn't afford them in the first place when they were in South Sudan. You know, in Uganda, in a refugee camp, they certainly can't afford them. But we did not win on that. And so right now the children are living in with a guardian of some sort. They're not happy.
So, and who knows what sort of circumstances that the children are living in. Probably, you know, whoever's caring for them is already stretched thin with resources, etc. Not only with food or shelter, but even emotionally, spiritually, physically, yes. Whatever. Okay.
We know that they do not have beds to sleep in. When they got from South Sudan into the refugee camp, of course their accommodations was just a tent, and that tent would be frayed in 3 months because they just can't stand up to the elements. But that was their accommodations. Well, we built a better accommodation for them to where they had very substantial shelter. They had their beds, they had their mattresses, they had solar energy so they could do their homework. And now that was all taken away. And they have no beds. They're sleeping on the ground, no mattress. They're not getting the medical care they need.
Proper diet. No
proper diet. They may get fed once a day. And we know this for a fact. And
when they broke up the Grace home, the children, they dispersed them back to relatives in South Sudan, or are they at another refugee camp in Uganda, or both?
At the refugee camps.
Okay, at refugee camps.
There's several camps, and they're dispersed. The pastors are keeping track of them, and we are trying to get them in school. Don't know if we'll be successful or not. The compound itself is, there are some guards there, and we are in consultation with our leadership team here and the pastors to determine what to do with the compound. And then if by God's grace we can reassemble and bring the children back, they would reoccupy the compound. I'd like to say that the children, it was not an orphanage, it was a family. And that's how they came into Uganda. And the predecessor to Save the Children met us on that day at the compound.
And subsequently.
And approved. Yeah, and approved, and they saw the conditions they were living in and saw how they were being cared for, educated, nurtured, and yet they are one of these major organizations coming in and breaking them up. Now, there is some legitimate reasons for going after orphanages, because worldwide there is a orphan care scheme where people make money off of orphanages and money, and so that's really what they're trying to address. but it's kind of like one size fits all, and that's how they've been applied to us, and that's where we are at the moment.
And when we set up Grace Home, we set it up as kind of a residential foster care, because our mamas stayed 24/7. You know, they didn't come in and pull a shift and go home. You know, they were the mamas there every day, all day, 52 weeks out of the year. And so they literally broke up the family. And the children are traumatized by it. And it's very frustrating to not be able to do anything about it.
Oh,
Yeah.
I can't imagine, because I'm just hearing this story and I don't even know, individual faces and people, and I'm just in turmoil inside my stomach right now. What age range are these children?
The age was, our youngest is 7, our oldest is 20,
Okay.
20 now. But that 21-year-old, whereas we think may be an adult and able to live on their own, was just in the freshman year of high school.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're in civil unrest and you're living, as Maslow would say, on that very base level of worrying about safety and security, higher level things take longer, because your safety and security is first and foremost. So your prayers are definitely, you're going to be in our prayers after hearing this story. I mean, even more so and more direct. As I'm sitting and listening, go ahead, Libby, go ahead.
I just wanted to say our plan is to get permission from OPM and the powers that be to let us bring them out and to go to school in the boarding schools in Uganda. If they will do that, we will keep supporting them with their education and their medical and that sort of thing. They may not be all under the same roof, but actually they will be, because we'll try to put them in the same boarding schools. But yeah, our hope and prayer is that we will continue to support them with their education.
Yeah.
Be on our prayer list too.
Please.
Sure. The other challenge is the church, the government requires us to register as an NGO, not a church. And they want, and we can't do that because we're foreign. We're South Sudan. We are registered in South Sudan. We are, and that was accomplished while we were here there in Uganda. The thing is that they want us to register as an NGO, and they want what they do is require you to have a board of directors or governors, a constitution, bylaws, and then have Ugandans on that board of directors. They have to have access to your budgets, and to see if you are hiring Ugandans and contributing to their economy. And if not, they pull your registration, and if you're an expat, they send you home. They have no concept of volunteer. When I tell them I am a volunteer, they say, with United Methodist Church. Who is your director? Who is this? Who is that? And I'm going, none. I work with the church. Which church? And I tell them, well, it's not registered. And so we operate under that. And because of that, we couldn't open bank accounts. So we, the leaders there, the South Sudanese pastors and Joyce, they formed what is called a community-based organization. And I think it's Community Empowerment United Methodist Church. They have opened a bank account, and that's where we're able to get money to that account, and then they can pull it out and do the ministry. So there are many challenges there, and this is just one of them. So when I go as a tourist. I can't put down, I'm a district superintendent, I'm this or that. Then they ask for a business work permit, and that's very costly, and you have to have it renewed, and you go through a lot of hoops. If they don't like what you're doing or not producing enough money, that can be pulled at any moment.
Wow. Yeah, it's so, not to be punny, but foreign to us because it is so
Yes.
different. And okay, so as you're talking about, Libby, is this your passion for healthcare and education and children, and Fred, just for your amazing skills and your willingness to be there and to use your hands in whatever God calls you to do. Is there something that you would wish that we would understand about your ministry? If there was just one thing, what would you wish for Church Streeters as a whole to understand about your mission and your ministry there?
I would hope people would realize that this mission, this ministry, is one thing that I've come to experience and learn, is that we're a human family. We are, all of us, one. And they have a very difficult time with tribalism. We do too, it's just another form. But I often, when I'm preaching or teaching, I'll tell them, if I cut my finger and you cut your finger and we put a drop of blood on 2 pieces of paper and I put them behind my back and mix them up and I take them out and show you those drops, can you tell the difference? And many of them will sit and look and they'll smile and grin and say no. And I said, why? And I said, the reason is we're a human family. And that's what it is. They are family. And I want people to know we're not caring for the least of these, because that implies the lesser of two. We minister to the vulnerable. We're blessed to be a blessing. We're with our family there and here. And I don't want to sound like a universalist, but we're part of creation. We're not separate from this world, from creation, and we're all connected. And being part of that connection, being part of that relationship, we get to experience God's grace and God's blessing and with one another. Those are the most phenomenal people. They're strong and they're undergoing unimaginable hardships, and yet they have a faith in God that just amazes me each and every day. And as they survive and as they get up, they are growing weary. And I had a prayer from one of my pastors, and he was praying for a Moses to come and lead them out of exile back home. And he, so I think the thing is just stay connected, stay in relationship with them. This is not a short-term thing. It's, you don't divorce your family. You may want to sometimes, but you don't. You're still family, and that's who they and we are. And so I would say, as a family, don't weary in doing ministry, and let us pick each other up, encourage each other, them and us, and keep moving forward. This is not going to be something we can fix in 2 weeks or put on the quadrennial agenda, mission emphasis, or so forth. It's going to be something we do long term. And I will tell you, if we don't, people will die, literally die. And I've already lost a pastor who was killed. They murdered him. And then I have another one who's been kidnapped and forced into the army. And then we had another one, they attempted to assassinate him, but we got he and his family out. They're with us in Uganda now. But it's just being in relationship with God in them. And I saw your mission theme, your stewardship theme was love God and love neighbor. That's what family is. You know, God created us to be this community, to be this family. And I'm reminded that part of the Eucharistic prayer, it's taken on different meaning, you know, make us one with each other, with Christ and mission in the world. And so it's being with them, being with you folks, being with Holston, you know, just enmeshed and immersed, knowing we are not alone and we keep moving forward. That was a long answer. I'm sorry.
No, I actually love it. And I'm so grateful that you tied in our stewardship theme, but also because it's so funny, the next question I was going to ask you is, how do you experience Christ in this work? And as you're saying this, on my heart, I'm just thinking about how my daughter, who's 5, said to me, Mama, you know, why did God create us? Why did we were talking about creation. Why are we created? And I said to her, Evelyn, God wants a relationship with us. That's why we're created, is for relationship. And it just, you know, it just tied everything together neatly with a bow, but it's true. God created us because he wants relationship with us. And we are created in God's image. And we need that relationship. And relationships aren't a, you know, I've done a Zoom with Fred and Libby. Now I'm in relationship with them. It's like, no, this is a constant back and forth, back and forth. You feed it just like you would feed your body. Relationships are a living thing. And not only that, but to be in relation with not just like people, but people that we don't know anything about, that we can learn about and grow to love and learn, you know, different cultures, different government, even how you're learning about the different loopholes of different governments. I mean, these are all relational things. And that's what mission ministry is all about. Getting to know people, letting God introduce us and work in our lives to other people, because every relationship truly is a gift from God. And so I'm just so grateful that you pulled that in together. And you know, I was thinking earlier how you were talking about your three arms of your mission and your ministry there in Africa. You've got the leadership development, the finance, and the education. And I was also thinking about the 30 wells and the churches and the schools that you've built, and what great stewards you are of the money and the resources financially, but also human resources. And it's a perfect example of what being a good steward of God's resources really is. And I'm so grateful to hear how the tithing money, and also people just like yourselves, with your tithing your gifts of nursing and leadership skills and all these things that you offer to help out your family in Uganda and in South Sudan. And I'm so grateful for that. So I guess my next question was, why is our connectional ministry important? And you've answered that in that question too. So is there anything else you want to add to what we've been talking about?
Yeah, I think I want people here in the U.S. to kind of lift our eyes up off the ground and look out on the horizon. And when scripture tells us, Jesus tells us, we're created in the image of God. And when we look in the eyes of another human being, who are we seeing? And like Jesus says, when you do it to the least of these or the most vulnerable of these, you're doing it to me. And so when you look in those faces, any face, it's seeing the image of God and responding to God, being obedient to God, and just, again, creating wholeness, a whole humanity, a whole creation, not only caring for creation, but for each other. And, I hope and pray we as a people, not only in the US, but in the world, can begin to view each other as a family. Because I was looking at our social principles the other night, because we're getting ready to have a very comprehensive training with our leadership over there on those. And part of that was saying that the social media has brought us in a unity we were unprepared for, and so I guess we're struggling and learning through that. And, it's such a blessing sometimes, but to be with those people in the midst of that. And, it is such a blessing in my retirement and in my waning years to be blessed by those people and be able to do this. And that you as Holston Conference, as mission leaders, as church, just the marvelous things you guys are doing. And we are so blessed with a leadership team here. Libby and I are not doing this by ourselves by any stretch. She has a board for Grace Home. I have a leadership team for the church and the Holston Foundation, and then the churches, those of you in missions. And so it's a family effort, a team effort, and we take whatever you entrust to us and just distribute it. And we just feel so blessed doing that. And I'm overjoyed, and I enjoy visiting with you and seeing you. And
is there anything that you both can think of that as members of Church Street that we could do to help support you even further?
Praying, and then the financial support, not for salaries, but for the mission and ministry. That is extremely important to be able to keep these ministries and missions going. It's just their lifeblood. Third is when we once again are able to go back in, if there are people at Church Street who can come. And oftentimes there's not a lot to do sometimes, except sit with the people. And you're such a blessing. When they see you, they get to sit down and talk to you and visit, and you give them such hope. And Mike Sluter has always said the best thing you can do is just get off the plane. And right now, in the midst of this, we're discovering new ways to get off the plane, like we're doing now. But I think when the teams, when we're able to go back in, if there are people there who can avail themselves, come and just see the people, visit with them, give them hope. And then, of course, the financial gifts, which you can give through the Holston Foundation, and just earmark them South Sudan. And so that's how we're administering funds right at the present, so we don't overburden the conference. And
Church Streeters have been very generous. So I'm really, really grateful that you've told us not only through prayer, but also how to give our money. And I will post a link for those along with the sound bites of this video so that we can know. And then also, Fred and Libby, keep in touch with us and let us know, hey, when this mission opens, I can't wait to shout from the rooftops to Church Street members to say, look, come on, let's go. Let's get off the plane, as Mike Sluter would say. So we will support you and help you however we can in the given moment. And so for now, that will be through our prayers and our financial donations.
oh, wonderful.
So I'm very excited. Oh, thank you so much for taking this hour with me and sharing your life story and your mission and your ministry.